Welcome to Education Matters, presented by the Public School Forum of North Carolina. I'm your host, Dr. Mary Ann Wolf. On this special episode, we'll take a look at the final debate, which was hosted by the Forum, of the 2024 State Superintendent Candidates Green and Michele Morrow. We are grateful to Moore County Public Schools and the Moore County Board of Education for providing us with the opportunity to host the debate at Pinecrest High School. The debate was moderated by John Hood and Senator Leslie Winter, the co-chairs of the North Carolina Leadership Forum. We have often said that education is on the ballot this year, and we hope that you will take this opportunity to learn about this vital race for public schools in North Carolina.
Let's talk about the role of the state superintendent itself. The General Assembly has the biggest role for determining K-12 education policy and funding. What are the most important roles of the State Superintendent of Public Instruction? If you were elected to this office, how would you allocate your time among these roles? We'll start with you.
Great. So I believe that there are two important roles for the State Superintendent in Public Instruction. One is to be the Chief Administrative Officer for public schools. The second is to be the Chief Advocacy Officer for public schools. So let me unpack both of those. The Chief Administrative Officer is in charge of certainly working with about 1,000 employees in the Department of Public Instruction, leading and guiding their work around any number of things, including helping to implement the standard course of study, implement the assessments that are provided, the accountability model that is put in place currently by the General Assembly, working hand in hand with the Department of Public Instruction, the State Department of Education, certainly licensing our educators as well. So massive, massive job, if you will. Also then we'll be guiding and leading our 2,500 plus schools. Then the Chief Advocacy Officer, I think, is critically important as well. This is, I like to say, the position that when no other position will stand up for public schools, this is the one that stands up for public schools. So, for example, when you're talking about the taxpayer-funded private school voucher program, whatever anyone else wants to do, this is the position that must say, yeah, but. We need those dollars in our public schools, no matter what I might think in a personal capacity about, sure, it'd be great for having competition and all these other things. Our public schools need those resources. How will I allocate my time? So it's going to vary. There will be certainly times when I'll be spending an inordinate amount of time being sure that we get the systems in place administratively so that our schools can function and be and move forward. But I'll have to spend also an inordinate amount of time on advocating for our public schools that desperately need, in this moment, additional resources to work effectively.
Michele.
You know, our Constitution gives the General Assembly as well as the State Board of Education and the Superintendent the awesome task of ensuring that every student gets a sound basic education in North Carolina. And while the General Assembly is the one that sets the law, the State Board of Education is the one that sets policy, it is the Department of Public Instruction under the leadership of the Superintendent that sets those standards, that has the professional development, that is going to be ensuring that our students are safe and that every district gets what they need, and really is going to be the go-between between the General Assembly when there is a need. I believe that the first thing that we need to do is we've got to build some bridges. We seem to be fighting against one another. It's the General Assembly against the State Board of Education, against the Department of Public Instruction, and what we really need to focus on is the students, the staff, and the individual schools. I would like to see a lot more communication, a lot more collaboration between the 8 different regions that we are divided up into. I think that everybody needs a seat at the table. I think we've got to go to our educators and ask them what they need, how we can be better serving them. We need to look at places that are actually being very successful. There are some incredible programs that are going on, people that have lifted themselves out of a failing school system, and we need to partner those districts with other districts that find themselves in a difficult position. It's going to be very important important to be communicating. It's going to be important to be listening. It's going to be important that we put our students, our teachers, and the boots on the ground staff at the forefront of every decision we're making, whether it's financial, whether it's the curriculum that we're choosing, whether it's our hiring standards and our licensing practices, whatever it might be, our safety and code of conduct. It is important that we work as a team so that everyone across the state, every student in North Carolina, regardless of what zip code they live in, should be getting an excellent education.
Mo, would you like a 1-minute rebuttal?
Thank you. So as I talk about this position, it's important to understand that you need to have someone in this position who actually does believe in our public schools, does not call them things like indoctrination centers, does not call them absolute cesspools of evil, lies, and deception, that does not say that they've been taken over by Satan. This is a position that you need someone who says, yeah, there's work to be done. There absolutely is work and reforms that must happen, but we must do it in the context of how do we move our district forward. We don't need to have someone who's allied with Mark Robinson, for example, who calls our educators wicked people. That does not move our districts forward, does not move our schools forward, will not move the state of public education forward. That, I believe, is important for this role of State Superintendent of Public Instruction.
All right, Michelle, what parameters, if any, should there be for the use of suspension as a disciplinary measure in K-12 schools?
Thank you. I really think it's important that we have a code of conduct that each one of our individual districts can adopt. It's important that our staff, our students, and our parents know what is expected of everyone when they walk through the doors of a school. It's also going to be important that they know what the consequences will be, so that they do not feel that they are being singled out for any reason whatsoever. I really think that the goal needs to be, it's not going to be about punitive issues. It's going to be how can we redirect students? Because what we're doing is we're actually training them to be able to handle difficulties, to be able to be in a situation with people that are different from them and have different views and goals. That's what our end goal needs to be, that everyone ends up being able to handle the circumstances in the classroom. So I think the parameters need to be, definitely we can give them an idea of this is what the code of conduct should be, but we need to hold them accountable. And as I stated previously, it needs to be the administrator's #1 role to create a culture of civility and respect and unity and excellence. We must raise our bar of expectation, and I truly believe our students will meet that expectation. We need to expect greatness and for them to do hard things, because life is hard. And I remind you, we are not raising up children, we are raising future adults. And we need the leaders, the entrepreneurs, the inventors, we need the parents, we need the tradesmen. We need the future people to be able to handle difficulty. And that's why we must ensure that we have places of civility and respect and discipline that our students can learn and our teachers can teach, and everyone is excited to get there in the morning.
So suspension should be part of a comprehensive system for working with our students on various issues related to character and performance in schools. So let's think about this comprehensive picture, if you will. Many of our students are struggling with lots of issues, and so I do believe that we need to be sure that we have the kind of mental health professionals that can work with our students. Folks like our school psychologists and counselors and social workers as examples. We are significantly out of whack with regards to what many folks would say we should have as far as ratios in these areas. I'll give you an example. School psychologists, the ratio should be about 1 to 500. We're at about 1 to 1,800, just as one example. Now, as part of this comprehensive system, then we also need to have character development. We need to be sure that we are teaching our students exactly how they should behave and comport themselves, and do it in a positive way, not just in a suspension or punitive manner. And then third, certainly there should be this focus on, well, if you do certain actions, absolutely there are consequences for it. Now, suspensions become real challenging, though, because in our state, and we're not unique in this regard, we actually suspend certain of our students far more than other students. Take, for example, African American males that we suspend multiple times over white males for exactly the same offense. And so part of what we've got to do is, if we're going to use this as a disciplinary tool, we've got to be sure that it's done in a fair and equitable manner across all sorts of demographics. That is part of then a comprehensive system. And again, I'll share that we certainly tried to focus on that in Guilford County schools, and we were able then to have schools be safer while also decreasing the number of students being suspended out of school.
I absolutely think that we should suspend students if they cannot behave and they are impeding the other students in the classroom, their learning. I do not agree that we should be determining who gets suspended by the color of their skin. I think that it has to be, justice is blind and balanced, and if all of our students understand what the issue is, you might not know this, but restorative justice, of which my opponent is a proponent, has actually limited the number of suspensions that can happen according to the student's race, and that needs to stop. We cannot allow our students to have different levels of behavioral expectations, and it's time for us to understand that if our students are not safe, if there's not order in the classroom, that learning is not happening.
Thank you so much for joining us. We will continue the debate after the break. Welcome back. We will continue the opportunity for you to see some of the debate between Michele Morrow and Mo Green for North Carolina State Superintendent.
Let's talk some more about school safety. And in particular, in your view, should we rely more on school resource officers to promote safety and security in our public schools? And what else is needed to keep our schools safe? Mo?
Great. So this is, again, part of a comprehensive system of safety. I certainly think that school resource officers and an effective relationship with school resource officers is necessary. However, as part of a comprehensive system, I'd actually start again with being sure that we have the level of mental health professionals working with our students. If we can increase those numbers to even come close to the recommended ratios, for example, I do believe that we'll have more students who will be able to engage appropriately in a school environment. Certainly then, we absolutely need to have school resource officers, but I would prioritize mental health professionals above school resource officers, and I would do it in the following way. School resource officers have a critical part to play, but they should not be involved in many of the day-to-day things that we get them involved in. Those should be left to our school administrators and our other educators in our building. We also then need to certainly do things like have, for more safety in our schools, think about things like hardening our facilities. For example, doing things that will make it much more difficult for folks to enter into our facilities, double entries, if you will. Things like metal detectors for folks when they enter into the buildings, cameras in certain locations. And then finally, I do believe that we need to focus on character development, teaching our young people how to comport themselves, how to be in relationship with each other, even when they're in disagreement with each other. I believe those things, along with many other parts of a comprehensive safety plan, will allow us to have safe schools.
Yep.
When I'm superintendent, I am going to have a statewide student resource officer program so that we can ensure that every school has at least 2 officers in it. You know, it's important for you guys to recognize that when I first won the primary back in March, I created a school safety advisory council, and that was to, with professionals, not just from North Carolina, but from around the country, that we can find the best practices in other schools, in other systems, so that we can ensure that our schools are safe. But you know, my opponent said that the violence and the crime and the drug use, that it's a false narrative. And in fact, when he was the executive director of Z. Smith Reynolds, which is what he just left rather than the superintendent's role, he worked with groups called the Education Justice Alliance as well as Building Peace. And those two organizations have made it their goal to remove all student resource officers from our schools. So he can stand here right now and tell you how he wants to make our schools safe, but that's not true. He believes that our children should be allowed to have counseling sessions and be diagnosed and talk to doctors without parents' knowledge. I'm a nurse, I've been one for 31 years, and I absolutely disagree that the school has the right to make medical decisions for our students. I believe that if a student is suffering, whether it's intellectually, emotionally, socially, that the entire family is impacted. And while we play a huge role, our teachers and our staff, in determining when someone is having an issue, the first call needs to be to the parents. We should not be diagnosing, treating, or counseling our students without parental involvement.
Let's have 1 minute rebuttal.
Great, thank you. First of all, to start off with law enforcement, let's be abundantly clear. When I was the deputy superintendent of Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, we had our own law enforcement division. That division reported directly to me. We upgraded what we were trying to do in law enforcement. So I absolutely in support of law enforcement having a role in keeping our schools safe. Now, let's be real clear about who talks about safety. And in this instance, let's be sure that we look at what her actual rhetoric is. She's the one that actually calls for people to be executed when she doesn't believe them. This is the person who has called for the public execution of Barack Obama. When you talk about safety, you talk about vulnerable communities. One of those would be our LGBTQ community. The plus, she says, now includes pedophilia, which is a false narrative. That community no longer feels safe when you have someone like that suggesting that kind of rhetoric.
All right, that concludes the question and answer segment. Now we're going to move on to closing statements. Each candidate will have 3 minutes. And Michele, you go first.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate and I understand that this is a great honor. It's also a great responsibility to be the candidate for the next superintendent of public instruction. I truly believe that education is the great opportunity maker. It is what lifts families and entire communities out of poverty. It is what is going to prepare the next leaders that we need in order to ensure that we stay at the forefront economically as a state. You know, I am speaking for everyone that has left the system, because there are a lot of people that have left because they have been browbeaten, they've been silenced, they've been forced into compliance, and they do not feel that they can any longer be in a system where they are not able to do what they're called to do. I believe teaching is a calling, just like nursing. I believe that when I was teaching biology, chemistry, civics, and Spanish to high schoolers who had chosen to leave the system, their parents had taken them out because it was not serving them, I believe that I have a very great idea of how we can move forward. My kids have been in public, private, and they've been homeschooled. And I think every single one of those systems has something to offer. But I truly believe that the direction that we go in education is determining the direction of us as a state, and it's determining the direction of us as a nation. And North Carolina right now is at the heart of this debate. It was in 1978 when Jimmy Carter created the U.S. Department of Education. And do you know that at that time, the United States was number 2 in the nation for our public school system? We look just 45, 46 years later, and we are 43rd. There is no reason in 2024 and 2025 why every student is not equipped for excellence to reach their fullest potential. But we are passing people along. We are choosing to focus on political and social activism rather than academic excellence. We are telling our students that their character, that their future is determined by the color of their skin, and nothing could be further from the truth. It's time for us to bring hope and purpose back into our school system. It's time for us to encourage our students that they can succeed. We need to bring back that statement that used to be talked about a lot, that here in the United States, if you work hard and if you're honest and if you're perseverant, you can do anything, you can be anything. I think that is the hope, that is the promise, that is what we want to tell every single student in North Carolina, and I think we can do it. I think that together we can ensure that our students are safe, and we can ensure that our public school system is the best in the nation and an example for everyone else to follow.
Thank you so much for giving me this wonderful opportunity to address you this evening. Thanks for all that you are doing on behalf of public education in the state of North Carolina. I will lift up 3 points. Again, experience, belief, and character. There's going to be, as I said, one person who has walked the walk and one who simply talks the talk. You're talking about someone who has been the superintendent of Guilford County Schools, the 3rd largest district in the state of North Carolina. Improved academic outcomes, things like raise the ACT scores, things like increase the number of students who took and passed college level courses while still in high school, increase the number of students who took and passed career and technical education courses. Under the old accountability metrics, we had the most low performing schools in the entire state of North Carolina. We're able to remove all of those schools from low performance status under that old accountability metrics, while also then increasing graduation rates and also becoming a national district of character. Also then creating things like STEM schools, like a parent academy, like even establishing and creating a scholarship endowment fund for graduates of Guilford County Schools, as opposed to my opponent who homeschools her students. Nothing against homeschooling, but you're talking about a massive educational opportunity that we're being asked to take on, right? Secondly, we start from a place of, yes, this is a good and sound system. How do we make it better? As opposed to, you've already heard what I've suggested, or what she's actually said. I'm not suggesting it. These are her actual words about her belief in our public schools. And then third and finally, let's talk about character. You heard what we tried to do when we made Guilford County Schools a national district of character. This person, my opponent, took her own children to the attempted insurrection on January 6th, comes back from the insurrection and puts her own cell phone video calling for setting aside the U.S. Constitution, calling on the Insurrection Act. This is a person who's called for the executions of many that she doesn't believe in. This is the kind of character. You can go to abcmorrow.com, every letter, look it up yourself. You'll see what kind of character you'll find with my opponent. That's the distinction between me and my opponent. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to each of you for joining us and for taking the time to learn about the candidates' plans for education, local public schools, and children across North Carolina. Thank you to John Hood and Senator Leslie Winter for your thoughtful facilitation of the debate. And thank you to Mo Green and Michele Morrow for providing the opportunity for us to learn more about you and your plans for North Carolina's local public schools and our children. Thank you for taking time with us to learn and think about education. That's all for today, and we'll see you next week.